Welcome to the Restricted Handling Podcast. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. We're going to start with what is still the gravitational center of the global security conversation this week, the expiration of the New START nuclear arms control treaty. This is an update on something we flagged yesterday, but now that we're a full news cycle past the deadline, the reactions and the lack of reactions matter more than the moment itself. As of Thursday, February 5th, there are officially no binding limits on U.S. and Russian strategic nuclear arsenals for the first time in more than half a century. New START had capped each side at 1,550 deployed strategic warheads and 700 delivery systems, with inspections and data exchanges that created at least some predictability. All of that is now gone. No inspections, no notifications, no ceiling. What's notable now is how calm, almost deliberately calm, Moscow has been about it. Russia's foreign ministry said the parties are no longer bound by any obligations and are free to choose their next steps. The Kremlin called the situation regrettable but emphasized it would act in line with national interests. That phrasing lands differently when it comes from a system that still treats nuclear signaling like a pressure release valve whenever it's frustrated. This is the same playbook that brought us Cold War brinkmanship and more recently thinly veiled nuclear threats tied to Ukraine. On the U.S. side, President Trump hasn't shown much urgency. He's repeated that if New START expired, a better deal could be negotiated. The White House line remains that any future agreement should include China. And that brings us to Beijing. China moved quickly to comment. This is where the update comes in. On Thursday morning, Beijing publicly framed the treaty's expiration as a blow to global strategic stability and urged Washington to work with Moscow to manage their arsenals. The Chinese Foreign Ministry emphasized that the U.S. and Russia together hold about 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, so the responsibility lies with them. At the same time, and this is the part that hasn't changed, China again rejected any idea of joining arms control talks. The justification is familiar, but increasingly consequential. China says its arsenal is far smaller and that it follows a defensive posture with a no first-use policy. That's true in absolute numbers, but the growth trajectory is what matters. China is now estimated to have more than 600 operational nuclear warheads and is adding roughly 100 per year. With U.S.-Russia transparency gone, Beijing gets to expand quietly, without inspections, while positioning itself rhetorically as the responsible adult in the room. It's a bit like watching someone criticize the mess while casually rearranging their own furniture behind closed doors. While nuclear diplomacy grabs headlines, China has also been making quieter, very strategic moves elsewhere, especially in the Arctic. This is an update on a story that's now clearer than it was even a day ago. Chinese researchers have confirmed that Beijing is paying Russia hundreds of thousands of dollars per expedition to gain access to Russian Arctic scientific vessels. Historically, Moscow has been extremely territorial about its Arctic coastline. That wall is cracking, and money is doing the work. The amounts aren't huge by state standards, under $1,000,000 per trip, but that tells you how badly Russia needs the cash and how cheaply China is buying long-term access. Officially, these expeditions are about science, water samples, rocks, sediment, climate data. Unofficially, and frankly not even subtly, this fits squarely into China's military-civil fusion model. Mapping, seabed analysis, and Arctic navigation data all have obvious dual-use value. You don't need them today. You need them when the Arctic becomes more navigable, more commercial, and more contested. This Arctic push also connects to China's long-standing courtship of Nordic research institutions. This week's China-Nordic research gathering in Tromsø was framed around climate and shipping routes, but the undertone was geopolitical. As Washington applies pressure on allies to limit Chinese access, Beijing is presenting itself as the steady, cooperative partner, especially as U.S. Arctic policy under Trump has looked, let's say, unpredictable. In that context, China is playing the long game with a straight face. Now let's shift to Taiwan, where the story hasn't dramatically changed, but the persistence is the story. This is another subtle update rather than a brand new development. Chinese aircraft and naval vessels continue daily operations near the island, crossing the median line and entering Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Taiwan's defense minister warned this week that the real danger is psychological as much as military. When this happens every day, people stop reacting. In response, Taipei is doubling down on asymmetric capabilities. On Thursday, Taiwan and US-based Kratos Defense announced successful testing of a jet-powered attack drone known as the Mighty Hornet 4. The test took place in Oklahoma, but the intent is very much Taiwan-focused. These are low-cost, cruise missile-like systems designed to be produced and deployed in large numbers. The idea is deterrence through volume and survivability, not flashy platforms. Less Top Gun, more swarm logic. China, meanwhile, chose spectacle. At the Singapore Air Show this week, the PLA Air Force's bi-aerobatic team flew Chengdu J-10C fighters directly to Singapore using mid-air refueling. That detail matters. It's a quiet signal about growing range and confidence. Inside the exhibition halls, Chinese firms showcased models of the J-35A stealth fighter and promoted commercial aircraft aimed at Southeast Asian buyers. The pitch was clear. China is ready to be your defense and aviation partner if you're feeling unsure about the U.S. That confidence abroad contrasts sharply with what's happening inside China's own military leadership. This is very much an update on something we've been tracking. Over the past month, Beijing has removed a series of senior figures tied to the defense, aerospace, and nuclear sectors. The most striking case remains General Zhang Yuxia, once Xi Jinping's closest military ally, now swept aside under the familiar banner of serious violations of discipline and law. What's becoming clearer is the scope. These purges have disproportionately affected officers linked to China's nuclear forces and the Eastern Theater Command, the unit responsible for Taiwan contingencies. This is happening as Xi pushes toward a self-declared 2027 milestone for military readiness. The message inside the system is unmistakable. Loyalty and control matter more than seniority or experience right now. Outside China, intelligence and counterintelligence cases linked to Beijing continue to pile up. In Greece, authorities arrested a senior Air Force officer accused of passing highly classified military and NATO-related information to Chinese intelligence. Investigators say he used encrypted software and specialized devices, and that the case began after a tip from a Western intelligence service. Greek officials are calling it one of the most serious espionage incidents the country has ever faced. France had its own parallel case. 2 Chinese nationals were placed under investigation after authorities discovered satellite dishes and computer systems at a rented property allegedly used to intercept satellite communications, including traffic linked to Starlink and military entities. 2 suspects are now in pre-trial detention. It's another reminder that this isn't about dramatic spy movie tradecraft. It's about persistence, access, and patience. That theme carried over to Washington as well. U.S. senators formally asked the Pentagon to review whether Chinese investors may have gained indirect stakes in SpaceX through offshore entities. Given SpaceX's role in military satellite launches and the Starlink network supporting Ukraine, even the possibility of foreign influence set off alarms. This isn't an accusation so much as a recognition of how strategically central private companies have become. On the technology front, governance is still lagging capability. At a military AI summit in Spain, both the US and China declined to sign a non-binding declaration on responsible AI use in warfare, even as dozens of other countries did. At the same time, China's own industry ministry warned domestic users that a popular open-source AI agent could pose serious cybersecurity risks if misconfigured, just as Chinese cloud providers race to offer it as a service. Speed versus control remains an unresolved tension. Finally, energy and economics. As India pulls back from Russian oil purchases following a new trade arrangement with the US, Russia is cutting prices sharply to keep Chinese buyers engaged. China imported a record volume of Russian crude in January, largely through independent refiners. Moscow's customer list is shrinking, and Beijing knows it has leverage. Thanks for listening and being part of the RH community. Please take a moment to leave a 5-star review. If you want to see some changes, email us at info@restrictedhandling.com. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack, where you'll find even deeper coverage of Russia and China, along with insights on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK.